What does it feel like to be trapped deep underground, surrounded by rising floodwaters with no way out? The sound of rushing water filling the darkness. What would you do if the only way to survive was to fight against nature's fury? In the depths of the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave, a group of Boy Scouts face this terrifying reality. What started as an exciting adventure turned into a harrowing battle for survival when a sudden and violent storm flooded the cave. How did they endure the cold, the fear, and the unrelenting power of the water? And how did their leader pull off a daring rescue? How many of them came out alive? Let's uncover the mystery. Welcome to Sinks of the Roundstone Cave, one of the most fascinating and adventurous caves in Kentucky. Located just 30 minutes away from Mount Vernon, this cave offers an unforgettable experience for explorers, adventurers, and nature lovers. Whether you enjoy walking, climbing, or crawling, this cave has something for everyone. Be prepared to get wet, as you may need to wade through water in some sections, so bring clothes that you don't mind getting muddy or soaked. One of the highlights of this cave adventure is the Pancake, a tight crawl-through space that leads to the cave's exit. A thrilling challenge for those seeking a unique experience. The Sinks of the Roundstone Cave, also known locally as Mullins Station Cave, is the fourth longest cave in Rockcastle County. It is part of the Daniel Boone National Forest and stretches over 13,500 feet. This cave has been a favorite spot for locals, cavers, youth groups, and college students for many years. The cave has a rich history tied to the early railroad workers who built the nearby L&N railroad tracks. The west entrance of the cave is located right next to these tracks, and remnants of its past, like an old water barrel and kerosene lantern pots, can still be seen near the entrance. These artifacts serve as a reminder of the cave's historical importance. The Sinks of the Roundstone offers a variety of experiences depending on the path you choose. Most of the cave features large, spacious rooms that are easy to navigate. If you stick to the main passages, it is an easy and enjoyable trek. However, for those seeking a bit more adventure, the cave's northern and western sections feature areas perfect for climbing and exploring tighter crawlways. The cave also has a southern passage with water-filled routes, where the water can be up to 20 feet deep during normal conditions. Keep in mind that this area can flood quickly during heavy rains, with water levels rising by as much as 30 feet in just a few hours. The cave floods from two main sources: a stream entering at the main entrance, and a tall waterfall in the middle of the cave. Visitors are advised to avoid these areas during rainy weather. There are multiple entrances to the cave, with the most popular being the railroad entrance and the main entrance. The railroad entrance is about 3 feet high and 10 feet wide, located near the L&N railroad tracks just before a railroad tunnel. Most visitors enter through this entrance and then exit through the main entrance. For those seeking a scenic route, the scenic entrance is another option, located farther along the tracks near an old quarry site. Parking is available near the 4th railroad crossing from Highway Route 25, as it is considered safer than the 3rd crossing due to reports of vehicle break-ins. From the parking area, it's just a short walk along the tracks to reach the cave entrances. The Sinks of the Roundstone Cave is a publicly accessible cave, but it is important to take precautions. Always check the weather before visiting, as flooding can occur rapidly. Bring appropriate gear, including a helmet, headlamp, sturdy shoes, and clothing that you don't mind getting wet or dirty. Since the cave is a popular spot for locals and cavers, there is some litter and graffiti in certain areas. But the adventure and beauty of the cave make it well worth the trip. If you're ready for an exciting and memorable experience, then the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave is just waiting to be explored. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced caver, this destination offers something for everyone. From historical artifacts to breathtaking passages and thrilling challenges, this cave is a true hidden gem in Kentucky. So pack your gear, gather your friends, and get ready to embark on an adventure that you will never forget. On June 6, 1981, Jack Hissong, a 41-year-old seasoned outdoorsman, led a group of 8 Boy Scouts and scout leaders from Troop 44 based in Mack, Ohio, on what was supposed to be an exciting and memorable caving adventure. The group included adults R. Morris, 38, and E. Zimmerman, 48, alongside scouts R. Fine, 17, T. Morris, 13, D. Kokata, 12, G. Marsh, 12, N. Long, 12, and D. Moore, 12. For most of these young adventurers, this was their first real caving experience, and their excitement was palpable. The days leading up to the trip were filled with preparation. His Song conducted a slideshow presentation to teach the group about caving, the necessary equipment, and basic safety tips. The scouts learned how to use multiple light sources, the importance of wearing hard hats, and packing food and emergency supplies. On the evening before the trip, the group checked their gear to ensure that everyone was prepared. Spirits were high as the group set out for the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave in Rockcastle County, Kentucky, a destination known for its fascinating underground passages and challenging terrain. The weather that morning seemed manageable, with only a 40% chance of light thunder showers. The forecast predicted clearing skies later in the day, so the group felt confident about their adventure. Jack Hissong, their experienced leader, had been in the Sinks of the Roundstone Cave during rainy conditions before. From what he had seen in the past, water levels only rose a few inches during rain, which was not enough to cause concern. Still, to be extra careful, Hissong checked the streams near the cave entrance. Everything looked normal, so the group decided that it was safe to proceed. At 10 a.m., they entered the cave through the railroad tunnel entrance, full of excitement for the day ahead. Once inside, the scouts were surprised by the cave's beauty and size. Towering walls of limestone surrounded them, and narrow tunnels led to hidden wonders. Using their headlamps, they lit up the dark passages, their laughter and voices echoing through the underground chambers. They climbed over rocks, crawled through tight spaces, and splashed through shallow streams. For the first 4 hours, it felt like an incredible adventure, a perfect mix of fun and learning. They even stopped for a lunch break, sharing stories and snacks before setting off again to explore more of the cave. But then, everything changed. As they made their way back to the main passage towards the cave's main entrance, they noticed something was wrong. A path that had been dry, or at least a little wet, was now completely flooded. The group stood in shock as they saw a fast-moving stream of water 4 feet deep roaring through the passage. But it wasn't just the water itself that was alarming. The current was so strong that it carried floating debris, like leaves and branches, showing just how powerful the flood had become. It became clear that something drastic had happened outside. Heavy rain must have caused a sudden and dangerous surge of runoff, and now the cave was filling with water. The group was no longer just exploring, they were now in real danger. Hissong went ahead to check out the situation. He carefully walked into the rushing water, feeling how strong the current was as it pushed against him. It was obvious that it would be much too dangerous for the scouts to cross. Just one wrong step could sweep them away. Hissong quickly decided to turn the group around. Their only hope was to go back the way they had come, retracing their steps towards the railroad tunnel entrance. As the group made their way back towards the railroad tunnel entrance, the situation became even more dangerous. The water in the cave was rising fast, and the mud-covered floors were slippery and treacherous. Every step felt like a struggle. When they reached a narrow, steep section called the funnel, things got even worse. The steep, muddy slopes were so slick that it was nearly impossible to climb across. The group tried to find other routes, but every alternative was blocked by water. Hissong, determined to keep everyone safe, quickly came up with a plan. Using ropes and slings, he created a hand line for the scouts to hold on to as they crossed the dangerous area. It was a slow and nerve-wracking process. One by one, the scouts took their turn, gripping the hand line tightly while the rising water swirled around their feet. The sound of rushing water echoed through the dark cave, a constant reminder of the danger that they were in. Some of the younger scouts were scared, but Hissong kept encouraging them, telling them to stay calm and keep moving. When they finally reached the junction room, their relief turned to despair. What had once been a passable area was now completely flooded. Powerful torrents of water roared through the room, creating chaotic cross-currents and waterfalls that crashed from nearby passages. The once quiet and majestic cave now felt like a roaring monster. The swirling, violent water made it clear that there was no way that they could continue. They were trapped. Understanding how serious the situation was, Hissong made a bold decision. He would try to leave the cave by himself to find help. He knew that it was risky, but it seemed like their only hope. He walked into the powerful current, determined to fight his way out. But the water was much stronger than he had thought. The first time he tried, the force of the water knocked him off his feet and pulled him under. He struggled to hold his breath and fight his way back to the surface, finally managing to grab onto a ledge to keep from being swept away again. Undeterred, Hissong tried again. This time, the current was even more aggressive. He was dragged under once more, slamming against the rocks as the water tossed him around like a rag doll. With every ounce of strength that he had left, he fought his way to a small ledge 140 feet away from the group. Breathing hard and shaken, he realized that he couldn't risk another attempt. If he failed again, he might not survive. Defeated but alive, Hissong climbed back to where the scouts were waiting. He told them that they had no choice but to wait for the water to recede. They moved to a higher, drier area of the cave and huddled together for warmth, knowing that their survival depended upon staying calm and working as a team. The group went back to a high, dry spot inside the cave. As time went by, the cold and the damp started to affect them badly. They were now in real danger of getting hypothermia. To stay warm, the scouts huddled together in a so-called body pile, trying to keep as much body heat as possible. They put all of their remaining food together and divided it up into small portions to keep their energy up. If someone got too cold, they were told to move around in some nearby small spaces to warm up. Despite the dangerous situation, the group remained calm under Hissong's leadership. He communicated with them using lights and shouting, reassuring them that they would make it out safely. After observing the water level for hours, Hissong decided to make another attempt to exit the cave once the flow had subsided enough to be safely navigable. On his third try, Jack Hissong finally managed to get out of the cave early Sunday morning. The floodwaters inside the cave had started to go down a little, but it was still very difficult. Outside the cave, the heavy rain had caused roads to flood, making it dangerous to drive. Hissong's car kept stopping because water was rising around it, forcing him to turn back and find a different way to go. Determined to rescue the group, he kept going, driving through the dark, wet night. Eventually, Hissong reached a mining site where he managed to get a truck inner tube. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline, something that he could use to ferry the scouts through the deepest, most dangerous sections of the cave. Wasting no time, he also contacted the state police to alert them to the emergency before heading back to the cave. With the inner tube and a strong determination to rescue his group, Hissong went back into the cave. Seeing him return must have given a huge boost of hope to the cold, wet, and scared scouts who had been waiting for hours in the dark. Without wasting any time, Hissong started working. One at a time, he helped each scout get into the inner tube and then carefully led them through the flooded passageways. Getting everyone out was a slow and stressful process. The water was still dangerously deep in some areas, and the currents were powerful. Hissong stayed focused, constantly making sure that each scout was safe as he carried them through the deep parts. The younger scouts held tightly to the inner tube, their faces pale with fear, while the older ones tried to help out in any way they could. Each trip across the water felt like a very long time, with the loud roar of the water echoing all around them and the shadows of the cave making them even more anxious. Despite the danger, Hissong stayed calm and focused, encouraging the group and guiding them step by step. Finally, after what felt like an endless ordeal, the last scout was brought through the flooded section. By 7:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, 21 and a half hours after they had first entered the cave, the entire group came out into the morning light. The scouts and their leaders were very tired, completely wet, and shaking from the cold. But they were alive and safe, all because of Hissong's bravery and how quickly he thought on his feet. The morning sun felt like a warm hug as they walked out of the cave, leaving behind the terrifying experience that none of them would ever forget. Now, looking back on it, the group had likely considered the weather carefully before entering the cave. But the storm that hit was highly unusual. It dumped 3.6 inches of rain in just 2 hours, far more than anyone could have expected. While Hissong's decision to attempt an exit during the peak of the flood was incredibly brave, it was also extremely risky. If a safe place to wait exists during a flood, staying put and waiting for the waters to recede is often the wiser choice. In this case, their refuge inside the cave kept the group safe until the flood began to subside. The events at Sinks of the Roundstone Cave in 1981 serve as a powerful reminder of the unpredictable nature of caving and the importance of preparation, leadership, and teamwork. Jack Hissong's quick thinking and courage undoubtedly saved lives that day, while the scouts' resilience and composure under extreme conditions demonstrated remarkable character for such a young group. Tumbling Rock Cave hosts wild journeys with cavers, from beginners learning the basics to experts who aim to push the boundaries of this intricate cave. Its famous horizontal route has made Tumbling Rock a great place to train kids and other new cavers. But its popularity and accessibility have also been its downfall. More visitors means more chances for accidents. One day, back in January of 2016, a sudden disaster stranded a 15-year-old caver in the dark tunnels of the cave. Then, a rescue team was faced with an almost impossibly rare situation on their way to the cave. The rescuers came dangerously close to choosing who would live and who would die. Find out how these bizarre events unfolded as we explore the depths of Tumbling Rock Cave. Energized by a good night's rest, a large group packed their cars for a trip to Tumbling Rock. Among their group were outdoorsy parents and kids who tagged along. Tumbling Rock attracts many first-time cavers who might be forgiven to underprepare, but even pros commonly enter this cave without all the gear that caving trips usually require. In one bizarre instance, a group of cavers didn't even bring a printout map to explore the cave. Instead, they navigated by looking at the back of another caver's shirt, which had a small map printed on it. He had to lay on his stomach to smooth out the ripples in his shirt so they could read it in the dim light of their headlamps, and they had to pray his shirt didn't get covered in mud, which is almost guaranteed when caving. Tumbling Rock is warm for a cave at 58 degrees year-round, so this group ventured to the cave with some rugged jeans and basic outdoor gear. It was a Saturday, a day when the cave is usually open for viewings with authorization from the Southeastern Cave Conservancy Group. So the family had all day to explore, and they half expected to run into other parties exploring the depths of the cave. They drove along a road and stopped by a fenced area with a trail behind it, flagged with multiple warning signs and a park bench. A beige house stood at the end of the road with a dilapidated shed and a porta-potty nearby. Although caving stories would suggest they were in for a potentially dangerous time, this party was far from the first ill-prepared group to enter Tumbling Rock. The cave has been frequented by church groups, scouts, and even reformed biker gangs. They parked just off the pavement near a grassy walkway and a sign towering from a rut that gets flooded in the rain. Moss-covered steps lead the group to the side of a hill. Small stones and rocky slabs jutted out from the dirt and leaves as they walked to a rocky overhang that marked the entrance of Tumbling Rock Cave. Beneath the natural stone awning, a metal gate blocked the entrance to prevent vandals and would-be cavers from dying alone in the darkness after biting off more than they could chew. The gate looked large from far away, but up close, they found it was only around chest high as they crouched down and entered Tumbling Rock thanks to their pass from the owners, closing the gate behind them as they pressed onward. Tumbling Rock is located in the famous Jackson County in Alabama, which has the most caves per square mile out of any county in the US, with over 3,500 caves in total. The sheer volume of caves has attracted a robust caving community, who also maintain strict regulations on the caves. Unauthorized access leads to many long rescues. But in Jackson County, if cavers disappeared without properly reporting their location ahead of time, it could be impossible for rescue teams to find them before they succumb to the cold or starve to death. With over 6 miles of tunnels to explore, Tumbling Rock can be an easy trip or a difficult slog if cavers want to test their limit and explore the whole thing. Incredible sights make for unforgettable scrapbooking moments as families snap photos of all the amazing formations, and this group wanted to see as many as they could. Just inside the cave, they reached a large, smooth structure that cavers often slide down to the floor below. Of course, the dips in the rock could cause them to drop on their toe bones, causing instant pain and even breaking bones if they tumbled forward. The older members showed the kids how to safely descend the slide, and they all made it to the bottom unscathed. Walking further into the tunnels, they found the 15-foot-tall Sugarloaf Mountain, with its massive waves of stone that form layers in the rock where cavers can climb through. At the top of this section, messages were carved into the rock dating back to 1813, when the cave was used as a saltpeter mining operation. Long ago, a cable connected across the ceiling to transport buckets that could carry the precious minerals out to the surface. The cave was likely reused roughly 44 years later during the Civil War. In the lower portion, signs designate the areas where mining operations took place, and red ropes warn cavers not to climb these fragile mounds. The cave's delicate flowstone, drapery, and other formations are still stained black in some places from soot, carried through the cave from the mining operations that blasted apart its walls hundreds of years ago. Going left took them through a 50-foot tunnel into the elephant room, with 2 huge pillars dubbed elephant legs that look like they're load-bearing support that hold the ceiling above them. The clay colors of the rock met with yellow ceilings with spots of darker stone, as the cave seemed to lack the sheen of moisture normally found along Sphalia Thames carved by mineral water. From there, the cave split into a variety of different twisting passages. They kept right at this junction to reach the cave's most popular spots. As they explored, they began to hear something. They weren't sure what it was at first, but as they kept walking, they realized that the sound was the perpetual flow of water rushing from above. Now, unexplained water could be a sign of disaster, but the sound just signaled that they were on track to find the next major feature of the cave. As they turned another bend, they found a large pile of rocks that clearly marked the next spot they wanted to explore. A mile into the cave, they reached the topless dome's 400-foot vertical tube, complete with a waterfall. Now, this section was tricky. To get to the tube, they had to climb up a hole in the ceiling. There were no ropes in place, and it was a free hang, with no footholds for shorter cavers. Complicating the route, the lip of the rock is permanently wet with gentle water flowing from above. Now, the first cavers were able to climb up easily, and one adult stayed behind to help the rest up. When it came time for the 15-year-old girl to muscle her way up the rock, she hesitated. She was nervous. And while she was a fan of the outdoors, she wasn't confident in her ability to lift herself up. She was also shorter than much of the party. Younger members were lifted up to the shelf by an adult, and the adults offered to help her up the same way, but she declined. Instead, she'd said she'd wait behind while the others explored. They didn't want to leave her behind, so they positioned some rocks below the lip so she had a shaky stepladder to help her complete the challenge. Looking up through the rock, their round spotlights shined on the rings of stone that layered on top of each other to form the cave, while a shower from the waterfall rained down the center of the chamber. They marveled at the sight and descended the chamber once more. They were now partially soaked in water, which wasn't bad yet, but even the moderate temperatures of Tumbling Rock would slowly wear on them over time. Then they completed another 10-minute walk to the Christmas tree, a large stalagmite aptly named for its resemblance to the pine tree and one of the many structures that donors can quote-unquote buy to fund conservation efforts. This is usually where cavers will turn around. By this point, many groups with novice cavers or children will run out of steam. It's unclear how far these cavers explored, but the cave had much more left to show the visitors if they pressed on. Groups formed by the University of Alabama spend almost 12 hours in Tumbling Rock. But even if those groups have novices in their ranks, they're likely stronger and more equipped to handle the cave's long, arduous passages. If this group wanted to finish the cave, it could take even longer. That is, if they could tough it out. They decided to press on, even though they were getting tired. It was easy going, but the sheer size of the cave made it a tier harder than most beginner caves. And when physical exhaustion kicks in, that's when mistakes are made. A little further on, they reached Mount Olympus, a 200-foot-tall mountain-like structure covered in mud. Beyond that point, the cave split into a lower stream passage. Getting to the next room required the cavers to jump across a small gap. The girl slipped on the other side, but she caught herself, and with the help of the others, she got up the small ledge. On the other side, workers carved steps to make the room more accessible. However, after that close call, the team decided to head back. It took them a while to backtrack, but eventually they made it back to the topless dome with around a mile left. It's unclear if their stone pile fell apart, or if they simply got unlucky with their timing, but in a disastrous turn, Tumbling Rock Cave lived up to its name. No one saw it coming, or even knew how it happened, but before they could react, a large boulder came flying down the side of the cave. It crashed into the 15-year-old, knocking her to the ground and pinning her leg beneath its massive weight. She cried out in pain as the adults rushed to her. They couldn't get the rock off of her, but they could tell her ankle was broken. She likely had multiple other injuries, but they couldn't tell how severe they were. In a whirlwind of panic, they debated what to do. The other kids wanted to get out of the cave immediately. They worried the cave could collapse at any point, killing them all or trapping them underground. However, the size of the party would slow down the exit. So one adult volunteered to exit while the rest would stay together. If the adult made it out and called for help, they could escort the rest out, while another adult stayed with the injured girl. The caver struggled up the slide near the entrance, but her pace was fast. It took a few moments for her cell phone to get its signal back, but once it did, she hammered the call button to contact emergency response teams. Her call patched through to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. The police were used to calls for help in Tumbling Rock, so they immediately reached out to the Hollywood Fire Department, whose active emergency unit could quickly reach the mouth of the cave and begin preparations for other teams. Then, the sheriff called various specialty teams in the vicinity, like the Huntsville Cave Rescue Unit, the Scottsboro-Jackson County Rescue Squad, and the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Rescue Service Cave and Cliff Team. The Chattanooga-Hamilton crew were the most equipped to handle this situation. They had the best gear at the time, and they could get there faster than other groups, so they immediately took charge to lead the mission. However, just 5 minutes after they were called to save the girl in Tumbling Rock, their phone rang a second time. Another rescue needed their attention in a completely different cave, nearly 100 miles apart, or roughly 2 hours away from each other. Unsure of what to do, they paused to talk among their team. If they split their attention between both caves, they might run into problems where they're missing gear or the expertise. One cave might require vertical experts, while another might need blasting specialists. If they sent the wrong expert to the wrong cave, the teams could make bad calls or fumble important tasks. And how would they split their gear? If one rescue needed equipment that was already in use by the second party, there would be no way to easily move it. At best, this split could make the rescues take longer. At worst, it could lead to multiple deaths. This rare situation had only happened once before in the history of the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Rescue Service. Back in 2011, the agency was called out to Tennessee, but then an hour into their travels, a second call requested them in Alabama. But these events were spaced an hour apart, so the CHCRS didn't have to choose. They simply had to decline the second rescue. There are only around 10 rescues per year in their entire quadrant of the country, so these double call-out events were extremely unlikely. Luckily, as they debated their course of action, their choice was made for them when the team got word that the Colmont Fire Rescue Squad could tackle the Tennessee incident alone. That freed up the CHCRS to focus on saving the high schooler from Tumbling Rock. The delay in the planning phase could have been an issue, but since Tumbling Rock was easy for the pros, they didn't need to gear up with all the regular attire for deep caves. Instead, they got to work searching in whatever clothes they brought with them. Some didn't even bring helmets, and others even skipped headlamps, relying on handheld lights and the lights from their fellow rescuers to guide them. If anything went wrong during this rescue operation, the team's lax safety procedures could come back to haunt them. Their own crew could be trapped, or others could be injured. The road by the cave was quickly lined with emergency vehicles and other cars. Inside the cave, the team took a different route to reach the girl. They crawled through the Blue Squeeze, a 2-foot-high tunnel that goes on for 40 feet. Once they reached her, they could tell her ankle was in rough shape. But even the combined efforts of the cavers couldn't dislodge the massive stone. Her pain was intense. She wasn't in life-threatening territory yet, but they had to act quickly. If infection took hold, or if any additional injuries sparked up during the extraction, her low mood could be an issue. The will to survive can help patients push through dire situations, but she was already having a tough time before the incident, and her now constant pain and misfortune didn't help. The rescuers had to get creative. The teams called in the use of specialized equipment. They tried using car jacks, pulleys, oil to reduce friction, and they even considered heavy instruments like pickaxes and blasting instruments. Then, they managed to fit some small four-wheelers through the gates of the cave. The treads and added horsepower of the machines gave crews enough force to lift the boulder off of her ankle. They quickly got her ankle splinted as they wrapped her in a special stretcher and began moving her to the surface. Now, this is usually the easy part of the rescue, but even with routes laid out ahead of time, the mission was still complex after the boulder was removed. Despite being such a widely traversed cave, the group had to take her through some tight sections that forced rescuers to innovate. If they couldn't make it through the tight corridors, they would have to blast or chisel away at the stone to get her out of this stony tomb. Even though a few strong rescuers could easily carry the litter, the teams had to group up to help her down some steep passages, and they had to collectively strain lift her over the mounds of broken boulders that blocked their path. But eventually, she made it outside in the darkness of night. It took crews around 12 hours of painstaking work to complete the mission. Over 50 rescue workers took part in the mission to save the teen caver from the dark expanses of Tumbling Rock Cave. She exited around 5 a.m. and was immediately loaded into a Life Force helicopter that flew her to the Erlanger Medical Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee for treatment. Since then, Tumbling Rock keeps making headlines. Just 4 years ago, a group of cavers undergoing 18 different trips into Tumbling Rock uncovered an additional 353 feet of unexplored passages at the end of a string of vertical climbs. Oddly enough, similar incidents keep happening, and they all occur around the same point in the cave, around a mile into Tumbling Rock. Something about that section seems to be more dangerous than the rest of the cave, since 2 more women were injured in roughly the same spot. The next incident happened 5 years later, when another woman in her early 20s got injured, while yet another rescue happened 1 year later in 2022. All 3 victims were injured around 1 mile into the cave, so be careful if you ever explore the dark depths of Tumbling Rock Cave.